No worries.
All right, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's just afternoon. Thank you all for coming to today's Coast General meeting. It's nice to see everyone here. Today, Eva is in Germany right now. So today we have on the agenda, we have Jensen, Scott Spaulding, and Craig Hart from SBCAG here to talk about new active transportation projects as well as rail updates. And then after their presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about transportation stories from Southeast Asia that I experienced early this year. So I have some photos and some fun stories to share. Before we get started, or let's do introductions first, and then we can do announcements. So my name is Erisy, and I'm the project director with Coast.
Craig Hart, SBCAG.
Amy Jensen, SBCAG.
Nikki Fox, SBCAG.
Susan Horan, Coast and the Transportation Committee for the city.
Bob Zempel's Goleta Valley Cycling Club. And other things.
Sally Cannon, Coast.
Hillary Blackerby, Assembly Member Williams' office, and City Transportation Circulation.
Scott Spaulding, SBCAG.
Hi, Barry Reynolds with Coast State versus School.
Coast and SBCAG.
Mark South with Coast and SBCAG.
Cass Ansberg, Coast member. Deborah Schwartz, Coast member. Planning Commission receives Santa Barbara.
Cameron Gray with Community Environmental Council.
Steve Moss and
Does anyone have any announcements before we get started? Well, I'll go ahead. Oh, do you have any?
Yeah, I was going to say, we're having a national celebration in Marina this weekend. It's going to be Sunday, September 18th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if anyone wants to come out to that, we're really happy. They're going to have some music, and a bunch of local EV owners are going to be coming out just to kind of show off their vehicles.
I could announce, I guess, that MTD is excited to tell those of you who haven't heard, we were successful in getting a fairly large Federal Transportation Administration grant, a nationwide competitive program. A grant for $5.68 million, which we'll add $1 million to, and it'll be enough to replace the remaining old 1998 local buses that we have. So we're really thrilled about it. It'll be a couple of years before the new buses are here, so don't get too excited.
Well, and for those of you who just walked in, if you want to introduce yourself and say your presentation to us.
Kathy Romeo, Santa Barbara City Council.
Eve Sanford, Santa Barbara Bike Coalition.
And the clipboard is going around, so if you get a chance to sign one, that would be great. And then I have an announcement as well for Coast. Maybe all of you may already know, but our annual fundraiser fall gathering event is happening on October 13th at the Spanish Garden Inn. It's a Thursday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. The link to buy tickets online is available now, so I'll send out a link to our listserv within the next couple of days, and invitations are going to be going out soon as well. So I hope you all can make it. It's a really lovely evening with a lot of music and food, and we recognize our Barry Siegel Award recipient, who's Kent Epperson, this
I just Goleta and Santa Barbara. So Santa Barbara counts are on the 27th, which is a Tuesday, and we have Goleta, Carpinteria, and Isla Vista counts on Wednesday. And then there are morning and evening shifts available, so 7 to 9 a.m., 4 to 6 p.m. And for more information on how to sign up, you can go to our website, sbcag.org, and it's like pretty much the first thing you'll see. And thank you, Hillary, for signing up. And again, Steve and we still have a few intersections left, so and there's a map on there, so you can go on and really understand where everything counting and all that stuff. Thanks.
Okay, well, with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So, that's up to you.
Okay, great. So I figured to kick this off with anyone who's unfamiliar with Measure A is a brief history of it. Measure A is a local sales tax, and the proceeds go directly to transportation projects. This was a countywide measure that was approved by voters back in November 2008, and it received a 79% support rate, which is really high, one of the highest in the state for any county that's passed this kind of measure. And Measure A funds some large capital projects, and then some of the funds go directly to transit operators. There's a lot of different facets of the sales tax measure, and one of these is 2 competitive grant programs that funds active transportation projects specifically on the South Coast, and then that's the program that Eva asked that I come and speak about today. And these are competitive grants. They run on a 3-year cycle. Currently, 52 projects have been funded under them. 19 of those are in the current cycle, which is cycle 3. This is very new, so most of them haven't actually commenced yet. Some of them are still waiting to get agreements approved, but they've been awarded funding, so they're coming down the line. And cycle 3 projects will have to be completed by June of 2019. So the cities of Carpinteria, Goleta, and Santa Barbara all received funding in cycle 3, as well as Coast, the county, the Bike Coalition, and Traffic Solutions. Projects funded under cycle 3 are really widespread. It's everything from bike and pedestrian plans to cyclemania. The most popular projects are probably capital projects, and that's everything from sidewalk infill to pedestrian safety. Those are really common ones in particular. There's one underway in Goleta, Fairview Avenue and Carrillo in the 101 intersection. Carpinteria is doing a ped bridge feasibility study on 5th Street. And one of the cycle 3 projects that touches a lot of different agencies, SBCAG included, but also the county and the city of Carpinteria, is the Rincon Multi-Use Trail. And that's a multi-use path that will run from the end of Carpinteria Avenue to Carpinteria to Rincon County Beach Park, and then it'll connect to Muscle Shoals, which will take cyclists out to Ventura if they want to take that entire route. And that funds preliminary environmental and design under this grant. I do have some handouts. If you want to see all the specific projects, I'll pass it around and you can take a look. There's 19, so it's a little long to list verbally, but if anyone is interested, this is also posted on the Measure A website, but you can take a look there if you like. And that concludes my presentation, but I can answer any questions on any projects funded under the program or the program itself if you're interested.
I just, first one, question about the trail that you just mentioned, the last part that goes all the way to Muscle Shoals. How does that fit with the bike path that's already there?
Well, currently the bike path that's there is on the other side. You have to take city streets on the other side of the highway. Yeah, but this will be on the ocean side, so you can do a continued route rather than have to cross over and go really far out of your way. Or bike on the side of the highway, which is, you know,
Yeah, Highway 1,
needless to say. Sorry?
Highway 1, which isn't bad, although it could use a repaving job.
It's not one of them.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have one question. Could you use any smaller print? I'm getting naughty years, but this is...
Oh, can you go over which section of the overland trail is going to get repaved?
sounds like a really popular project.
Let's
I don't
check.
think it's the entire extent.
I might not have that information on me right now. Let me take a look. Let's see. Where'd it go? I don't have that with me right now. I'm sorry. I could get it and send it to you. I just don't have that level of detail for all 19 on me.
Yeah, that's okay. I can ask Matt.
And I'm thinking, I may be wrong, but if I remember right, it was from MoDOT West.
I don't remember, so I can't confirm or deny.
No,
But Stu was on the
Positive,
historic committee.
That's what I'm thinking. From where it meets MoDOT going west.
But not the entire thing, right?
No, or some
Yeah.
length of it.
Somewhere between Modoc
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it bad, like,
Isn't that right?
It ends at
yeah.
Oh, that side. Okay.
We want to move on to
Scott's
Scott.
Well, it's been a while since, I think it's been a while since I've come and talked to the coast about rail. First question is, how many of this group, I'm curious, have been to PacificSurfliner.com or the website? You don't know?
lately.
I don't count.
One
Very
thing is-
Very recently.
Yeah, it was redone several months ago, and it was actually, we had to actually acquire the domain, and the Surfliner JPA, which SBCAG is part of, redeveloped the site. I think it was fantastic, and it has a lot of information about the different stops. It certainly has all the schedule and everything. It's a little bit of a temporary site, because we're doing a much larger project for the website itself. It's going to be a lot more comprehensive, but I would encourage you to check it out. It has specific information on Santa Barbara in particular, where Santa Barbara, the city, is a major destination, so in the service area. Also have these little products that were developed, communities around, these are available, that kind of talk a little bit about the service itself and the website too.
So, does Amtrak have a link to your site?
So there used to be, and maybe just I should start over a little bit. The Pacific Surfliner. How many of you use the service? Almost everybody. Okay, good. Second busiest rail corridor in the country. Second only to the Northeast corridor, and California actually has 3 of the 5 busiest rail services in the country, and all 3 are fully state supported. So, in contrast to the Northeast corridor, the big one between Boston and New York and Washington, which is very heavily federally supported. The Pacific Surfliner in San Joaquin and California Corridor, the 3 services in California, 100% state supported, no federal support for that. And again, 3 of the 5 busiest in the entire country. Until last year, the state Caltrans actually ran the San Joaquin and the Pacific Surfliner, and it was a very hands-off approach. They just let Amtrak do sort of whatever Amtrak wanted to do and pay the bills. For several years, it was about a 3-year process where in the Capital Corridor was actually running their own service, still contracting with Amtrak, but running their own service for, I think, almost 20 years now. And they've been able to do all sorts of things because they have local control for the service that the other services weren't able to do because of that hands-off attitude that Caltrans had. So, over about 3 years, we passed some legislation at the state level that allowed for the 2 JPAs, in particular the Surfliner, to take over control, this direct control and management of the service, which began in July of 2015 last year. So far, we've been really happy with it. The JPA are the regional planning agencies between San Luis Obispo and San Diego. So there's 9 voting members: San Luis Obispo, Ventura, Santa Barbara, LA, Orange County, and 3 in San Diego, and Riverside as well, because they actually have some track rights. And we hired the Orange County Transportation Agency to manage the service for us, but we have a board, Supervisor Carvalho as a representative, and has been very active in sort of overseeing the service. And we're able to do things now that we just weren't able to do when Caltrans was running the show. One of the things is to do this website as an example and put these marginal pieces together. We just also recently refreshed refresh the entire menu in the cafe cart. Last month was the first year-over-year monthly report. Sales were up 30% in food and beverage, which is a result of that helps Fairbox. We actually get to keep some of that money, which is great. So there's things like that, along with the schedule, that we're able to do that we just weren't able to do before. So with that sort of as a precursor, and I always try to, whenever I'm talking about the surfliner, talk about the fact that it is the second busiest thing. I just hammer on that, everybody knows what I'm talking about. And because a lot of people don't know that, including most of our state legislators, and since they're the ones that pay the bills for the service, we have a process of sort of continuous education for our assembly members and our senators to make sure that they're aware of the service and that they support it, because the three services do not have a dedicated stream of funding in the way that transit agencies do in the state. And so for either operating or capital, and so we're a little bit at risk in terms of what the future might hold. There's no, and as I mentioned, there's no federal support for these services. It's for state support. So again, sort of with all that as a precursor, one of the major goals that the Surfliner Board has identified over the last several years is to retime the service in our area to operate during peak hour, to be able to meet, to reduce some of the congestion along one to meet that demand from between Ventura County and Santa Barbara County. And it's, and as I think I mentioned this group before, there are a lot of difficulties and challenges that are involved in that. We don't own the railroad, the Union Pacific owns it. We have to work throughout the entire 350-mile corridor to make sure that once we retime the train, it doesn't have a cascading impact all the way down to San Diego. Or if it does, which it will do, we need to be able to account for that. It's a very congested corridor with Metrolink and Coastal Freight throughout the entire corridor. So the good news is that there's a cap and trade funding program called the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program, and the Surfliner and JPA submitted a $150 million application for, and we received about $80 million in funds, which is the single largest award for the program. There's about almost $400 million that were awarded statewide, and a lot of the projects were for infrastructure projects in San Diego County, some in LA County. But one of the wins that we got was $15 million for additional rail equipment, and I have some pretty pictures of what that rail equipment is. I can hand these out. It's not you're all familiar with what are called California rail cars. It's bi-level, it's up and down, and they're large and they're standardized actually around the country. The set that's available for lease was there were two sets of totaling 31 cars that were available because the state of Wisconsin actually canceled an order that they had from a Spanish manufacturer called Talgo. And so they had built these cars, and the state reneged on their order, and it was 4 or 5 years of litigation. But the cars are actually on the market available, and they have been for a while. And so we were just awarded funding, not as much funding as we asked for. And so what we're trying to do right now is figure out, we were awarded $15 million, we asked for 32 for the 31 cars for 2 different rail sets. And we're not sure whether we're going to be able to just lease half that. It's actually a fully maintained capital lease, so it includes maintenance. But the idea is that with at least one additional set of cars, we're going to be able to have some schedule flexibility that we just don't right now with the limited number of train sets that we have throughout the corridor. The trains that you see up and down the corridor here are in use, as much as 16 or 18 hours a day, and so we get a lot of use. And to be able to have an additional set is going to allow for some things that we just can't do right now with the equipment we have. The other added bonus for this particular set is that it's actually a tilt-in train, and so it can handle the curves in the area north of LA a little bit better. So there'll be some time savings in trips between LA and Santa Barbara, which is, of course, positive. It's not giant, but it always feels better when you're going faster on the train rather than slower. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that as part of this TERSIP grant, we were awarded $500,000 to conduct what's called a robust timetable schedule in the area between LA and San Luis Obispo. We conducted a very similar project or study south of LA that concluded last year. It was very successful working with railroads. And like I said, there's a lot more congestion on there. There's 2 commuter railroads that we don't have up here. And so we're hoping that that's going to be able to feed into what we're going to be able to do with this new equipment in terms of the schedule. So generally good news, we got some awards. I don't have any new news on when the peak hour service is going to be implemented. But I think with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about property health.
I have a question. Where do you stop in Toledo? I know there's a stop kind of.
You know where La Patera is? You know where the airport is?
Yeah.
Right across from the airport. And
Is there a stop somewhere kind of like almost outside of Toledo, going toward El Capitan? Is that one of your stops? Because I know there's been concern that's kind of isolated. It's kind of not in town. So people get out.
Do you know where that is?
That's about the La Patera train station. Maybe that's what you heard. I think that's what people look.
It's kind of on the house. Yeah, it's not
it needs improvements for pedestrian access and transit.
Yeah, the Goleta station is at the end of La Patera, so it's kind of directly across from the airport. And it's located actually in an area that's going to be developed over the next 10 or 15 years or so. And there are actually some major employers within walking distance on Robin Hill and Inmar there, Great in particular, which is positive. There are other employment bases over by Historic and Los Caneros that have more employees, and so it would be ideal to have a stop there. Pretty new stop on an intercity rail service is quite a complicated undertaking, but so we're sort of have to play the hand that you're dealt on that in terms of the location of that station. But we do have plans when we're able to implement the peak hour service for things like connecting transit service and actually bike sharing to be able to have people be able to get to where they need to get to.
This is a dumb question, but you say that the northeast corridor is federally funded. Why are we not federally funded?
Excellent question. Not a dumb question. I always ask that question all the time. Part of it is they are a much older corridor, and so Amtrak actually does own some of the infrastructure on that. And so there's been 100 years where they've been able to sort of institutionalize how that service and how that whole corridor is funded. There's a lot of different services that use that corridor. The practical matter is that they have, because it goes through, I think, 7 or 8 different states, they have 14 or 16 senators where we have 2, and that's a real factor when you're talking about funding at the congressional level. Same goes through at the House of Representatives. They just have a lot more congressional presence and power to be able to get some federal money to support that.
Some of them probably even write it.
Some of them do write it. Yes. Just like we have a lot of our state legislatures use our service.
And are any other states federally funded?
There are some. There's a whole coalition of state-supported rail service. California's obviously the leader on that. Illinois, I think, and Pennsylvania have state-supported, and some of the Northeast states, Washington and Oregon has the Cascades, and I think they contribute to that. So there are other states that do the same thing California does, but I think we have something like 40 or 50% of the state-supported market.
And we do have the federally supported Coast Starlight.
The Starlight operates between Seattle and Los Angeles, and it does come through Santa Barbara. So that's one trip a day, whereas one round trip, whereas we have 5 on the certain lines in Santa Barbara.
I can tell you, the other day I friend of mine on Facebook was lamenting, like, how come the train, how come there's only Wi-Fi and business class, whatever. The way he was complaining about the service he was on, I was like, you're on the Coast Starlight, aren't you? He's like, what's the difference? So I like laid out all the things like, probably it's more locally controlled. You can have a better venue, you can have free Wi-Fi for all classes, you can have this and that.
Interestingly enough, so there is one there. Where was he going? Probably. So there's one trip. There's one Starlight trip, which is it's what they call long distance service. It has a lot more challenges in terms of long distance, for example, it's originating in Seattle. But it can be considered a sixth trip between, say, here and LA. It doesn't stop in either. Some of the other places in Ventura County, for example, the Surfliner does. And there's been a little, since we took the service over from the state, there has been some increased attention paid to the Starlight by Amtrak, because now they can see that there might be a little bit of competition and there's been some price adjustments on the Starlight that haven't necessarily been very helpful to the Surfliner. So it's an interesting dynamic that's involved. Not necessarily unhealthy, certainly when there's a perception of competition. That's usually good. And again, as I always say, please consider me a resource when it comes to anything. We have more regional transit. Don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions.
Thank you, Scott.
Great. What are you going to add to the presentation? Okay. Great. I'm going to get the computer set up. You can sit there if you want. I'll sit right here. All right, well, I'm kind of going to change the topic a little bit from regional transportation to transportation on the other side of the world. I guess I want to see, has anyone else in here traveled in Southeast Asia or experienced the kind of chaotic transportation there? Seeing some head nods, so that you know the chaos and rhythm of the transportation in this side.
Claim your space.
Yes. Yes. You definitely have to rely on. Yeah. So I named it Transportation Stories from Southeast Asia, Navigating Chaos with Creativity and Collaboration, because often that's something that I found in a lot of the cities I traveled to, was that people seem to be navigating this chaos with such creativity, and that the diversity of modes of transportation you see on the roads in larger cities as well as smaller villages is so vastly different than what we have here. I mean, you see these outlandish colors and rickshaws and trishaws and tuk-tuks and all of these different types of things, and tons of people on each. I mean, this like 25 people in the back of one pickup truck on the roof and on the floorboards. So I think with a lack of regulation in these places comes this creative way of getting around. And also with collaboration, a lot of these places that I went lacked an agency, central agency to monitor the roads, to maintain them, to make sure people are following the rules of the road. So you see this collaborative effort among the people to, let others know that they're coming, they're passing lanes or pedestrians and bicyclists. You kind of see them all working together in this rhythm that maybe you don't see here. So for those of you who don't know, earlier in the year, from January to March, I took a leave of absence from Coast to go teach for a program in Thailand and Malaysia that does field-based research on the coral reef ecosystem. So as a TA for a program that I was a student on a few years ago. So while I was there, I traveled to Thailand, Malaysia, and then I spent a little time in Myanmar and Indonesia after the program. So from going to so many different places, obviously we're taking lots of modes of transportation. So I thought I would tell a few stories from my experiences there and show you all a few pictures of some of the wackier ways of getting around. And I'm going to focus a lot on Myanmar because I found that place to be kind of the pinnacle of diversity and chaos with transportation. So here's a little map of the places that I went. And Myanmar is also on this map referred to as Burma, so I sometimes use those terms interchangeably. I thought this was a good picture because it kind of exemplifies a lot of the transportation you see. You see motorbikes with lots of people on them, you see someone walking, you can tell that the road is part dirt, part pavement, but you can see some holes in it. You can see one of the Toyota pickup trucks that they've turned into public transportation. You can see, I think that's a tuk-tuk, the blue on the right-hand side, and then a rickshaw. So kind of see a lot going on. I found this data a few days ago, which I thought was interesting, from the World Health Organization. That's road safety management strategies and targets by country. So I just pulled out the countries that I went to, and one thing that I noticed was that for Myanmar, it says a lead agency is present. It says yes, but is the lead agency funded? It says no. So I thought that maybe there's the problem right there. And then here's another interesting table. It's road traffic deaths and proportion of road users by country. So I think the column that makes the most sense is the estimated road traffic death rate per 100,000 population. And you see that, I guess Thailand is the largest number there with 36.2.
That's not surprising.
Yeah, which is not surprising because there's a lot going on there. I thought that Myanmar would be higher, but it's still, all of those numbers are a lot larger than, double or more in the United States. I guess Indonesia is only 5 more, but I thought that was interesting as well.
Erisy, while you go through your presentation, and since Vision Zero is coming to the City Council, when is it, Kathy, or this fall? Is Vision Zero coming back to City Council?
I think so.
I'd be curious at some point in your presentation if you have some insights or some comments about correlating the death statistics or fatality accident statistics with our principles of and our strategy around achieving Vision Zero.
Yeah, that's
Are there any takeaways from what you're going to experience and what you're going to present to us?
Yeah, I can totally. And so I wanted to start talking a little bit about the roads in Myanmar. And this is one of the roads that I traveled on when I was there. And actually, I'll tell a little story in a little bit, but we got stuck in a 27-hour traffic jam on that road. That road leads to China, so it goes from Mandalay, which is the old capital in Myanmar, to China. So there's always people along that corridor taking goods to and from China. So a lot of trucks go on that road, and that road can only really accommodate one lane of traffic. So from that, what happens is you get these day-long traffic jams where one side of the road is allowed to travel while the other side waits. So that was somewhat of a nightmare, if you can imagine those switchbacks full of what looked like 5 o'clock traffic in LA on a road like that. So that turned into a 27-hour adventure on a bus. So another interesting thing about the roads in Myanmar was that, so they drive on the right-hand side, but that wasn't always so. So in an effort to distance themselves from the British colonial period, because originally Myanmar was colonized by the British, but then the British left in the 60s. So they wanted to distance themselves from the British, so they decided, and the military government decided overnight that they were going to switch to the right side. So in consequence, what happened is a lot of the vehicles they still have are before 1970, because this happened in the 60s and 70s, and then a lot of vehicles are, cheaper vehicles from Japan that get sent to Myanmar. So what happens is you have steering wheel on the right side of the car, but you're driving on the right side of the road. So a lot of the drivers are in a kind of permanent blind spot, especially when they're going to switch lanes or try and pass someone. So that in itself is a pretty terrifying experience when you realize that the drivers are just weaving in and out, and the steering wheel is just on different sides of the car every time you get in. One thing I noticed that they do to cope with that is every time they're going to pass someone, they honk their horn. Mm-hmm. So you're just constantly hearing this beep, 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 beep all day, anytime you're on the road. And at first we thought that people were just being aggressive and rude and honking at us, and then you realize, no, they're doing that because that's their way of telling people, hey, I'm coming and I'm passing you. So I thought that was another creative way to deal with a lack of infrastructure. And another thing I noticed is there's not really crosswalks. I never noticed a crosswalk, and the traffic lights are also negotiable. It's not enough. And I think maybe that comes from that lack of funding from the agency to monitor the roads, that people just do what works for them in the moment. So a few other photos, the kind of the concept of sharing the road in this area of the world. It's not just for cyclists and cars, but you see a lot of things like horse-drawn carriages, ox-drawn carriages. Again, here's the Toyota truck that's become public transportation. You see a lot of things like that, with lots of people piled on one vehicle. It's another photo. Oh, I don't have to move up, but let's see. Oh, that's the same thing. So that's one of the tree straws, I think. So they have 3 wheels on the bicycle, and there's a little seat on the side to the right of the cyclist. And you can kind of hire those for transport on the road. And you see people also carrying bags of rice and vegetables and all sorts of goods piled up above their head on these bikes. There's another image. And there's another source of transportation is called a tuk-tuk. The word tuk-tuk comes from Thailand and refers to a 3-wheeled vehicle. So
in Thailand they call them tuk-tuks.
Tuk-tuks. Okay. Oh, there's me riding in the back of one. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about buses as well. This is a bus that we took in Thailand, actually, and I just wanted to draw attention to the fun and colorful adornments that they add to their buses, because this bus had all sorts of decorations on it. It had these little Michelin-type men on the front and all sorts of decorations on the inside. It was big and orange, and you see so many things like that with these buses that have these very elaborate curtain patterns, and so it seems like they're adding another creative element to their transportation. Okay, so these are actually pictures from our 27-hour traffic jam. Here you can see the trucks just going back as far as you can see. Here's a photo of us. My brother and his wife came and met me in Myanmar when we were traveling, so we got off the bus. And another thing about these buses is that they have, you can't really stand up to stretch your legs because they pull out an aisle seat and it unfolds and they load people in those seats. So you're trapped on the bus with people in the aisles. And to start this trip, the bus was actually 5 hours late. And that's really common. And people always tell you that before you travel to Myanmar. They say, well, the bus and train are very unreliable. You can arrive and maybe they just don't come, or maybe they're 5 hours late. So we've been waiting at the train station or bus station for 5 hours, and we get on the bus, and then we're on it for 30 minutes. It was a night bus. We're supposed to arrive where we're going. It's 6 a.m. and we get on the bus at midnight, and we drive for an hour, and then it just stops and turns off. We had no idea. We had no way of knowing what was going on. We were the only travelers, and we ended up staying until the sun came up. We were on the bus all night, and then we realized that everyone had just turned off their cars and gone to sleep because the traffic was so bad that there was nowhere you could go. And I just think it's interesting to compare that to, if that were to happen here, can you imagine a traffic jam in LA? Everyone saying, let's just all get out of our cars and go to sleep. Because, it's just so drastically different, the mentality, and I think it's because this happens so often that people they just deal with it. Because everyone else seemed very, just like, this is regular, and we were, kind of freaking out. Finally got off the bus, stretched our legs, and then a nice person gave us watermelon to eat. And then this is after, 20 or so hours. So, and then, the outcome, it's kind of a long story. We ended up getting off the bus and just started walking down the road, seeing if we could hitch a ride, and turned out that these gentlemen here gave us rides on their motorbikes and saved us from this labyrinth of traffic. And there we are with them, and they were so kind. And that's one thing about the people of Myanmar, is that even though they put up with such, lack of infrastructure and a government that doesn't really give them a lot of resources or make life easy, they're all still so kind and giving. And when we tried to tip them for this ride, they could barely speak any English, but the one thing they said to us, we tried to give them money, and they said no, and they pointed to their heart, and they said, it's from the heart. So that's something that stuck with me. I think it always will, because it was so kind, and they had no idea who we are, and we were just all of a sudden jumping on the back of their motorbike with a bag and my guitar, and it was crazy, and they were so kind to help us out. So that's always a story that sticks with me. So moving on from buses, I want to talk a little bit about train travel, which is equally as unreliable and chaotic and bumpy and lack of infrastructure, and something I wanted to pass around that I still have that I thought you all may be interested to see. This is a train ticket that was my train ticket from going from Bugan to Yangon, which is halfway across the country, and it's all still handwritten. So I thought I could pass it around. It's kind of interesting to see. So has anyone seen Anthony Bourdain's episode of Parts Unknown? He travels to Myanmar, and he takes the same train that we did. And it was an overnight train, and the train system was originally built in 1877 by the British. And it's, pretty unreliable. The train tracks are not well kept or maintained, and it's just can be, at some points you see cyclists biking faster than the train is going. And then in the night, the train starts just kind of careening down the tracks, and the windows, you can't close the windows. They're usually broken, and so there's just things flying in, and the trains can be anywhere from 10 hours delayed or just not show up. And you can see the sign for the booking office, and the first time we showed up at the train station, there was no one there to even sell us a ticket. It was deserted, so we had to leave, and then we came back the next day. So it's just so drastically different from what you're used to. Here's another image. A cool thing is whenever the train will stop at all these local villages, and it's really cool to travel by the train if you kind of maintain a sense of humor and flexibility. You get to see a side of the country that you wouldn't see anywhere else, because they go through all of these very traditional rural villages where people are still farming with ox, and you see these bamboo houses, and people come up and will sell you produce and all sorts of treats. So it's a really cool way to travel if you're in for the adventure. There's even my sister-in-law sticking her heads out the window. Nice. And here's some of these markets that pop up along the train tracks. And then I want to talk a little bit about biking as well. And outside a lot of the major cities, bicycles and motorbikes are kind of a pretty predominant way of getting around. You also see a lot of horse-drawn carriages. But you see a lot of people, a few people on a bike. And you see a lot of things like that. You see people just so much on their bike and balancing things on their heads. It's phenomenal, the things that pass you by in these smaller cities and smaller towns. Wow. Here's a photo of us, my sister-in-law and I, motorbiking. And one thing I wanted to talk about was helmets. And those are just also very hard to come by. And especially if you went around a bike or a motorbike. And there was one instance where you ask for a helmet and you just get laughed at or smiled at and they shake their head. And then there was one time we asked for a helmet and they gave us what looked like a Halloween costume fireman helmet without a buckle. So we're going to have spiderwebs all in it. So I was like, I think I'll just, take the risk in this situation. So it's just, a really different concept of what is safe. And I also think that maybe because this is such a predominant way, and in smaller cities there's less cars, so this is just the way of life. There's less defense on, I gotta watch out for really speeding cars, and they've just grown up in this way of not having the helmet, not having the bike lane. So maybe through that they've adapted. They're better at navigating, and they're, because kids grow up riding on the back of a motorbike to driving it. So it's just different.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What was the building in the back of that?
That's a temple. So this is an area called Bagan, and that's kind of the iconic photo that you often see in Myanmar of these old temple ruins scattered along these really arid plains. And they're just, since there's not a lot of tourism there right now, they're just all scattered, and you can just get a motorbike or a bicycle and just kind of navigate through these dirt roads, and you can go inside these doors and walk up these steps, and there's all of these, statues of Buddha, and you can walk up the sides. And it's a popular thing to do is to go up there for sunrise, and you can see the sun come up sitting on the outsides of the temples.
Did you say most of these are abandoned?
They are, and they haven't really been upkept either. So there's been some. I know that they were trying to register this area with UNESCO, but they didn't receive the certification because the military government was trying to. They realized that this was a tourist attraction, so they were trying to go in and start, making them look new and nice again. But they were doing it without regard to the natural materials that originally were used. And so you see some people say, because you can see some of the old temples that they've tried to make new again, almost look like something you can see in Disney World. Like they didn't really pay attention to making them look authentic or how they were originally built. So UNESCO wasn't as excited to have it be one of the World Heritage Sites. So I know that's there's some contention around that. So a lot of these areas you go in and it feels like Indiana Jones or something. There's all sorts of cobwebs and these dusty statues of Buddha and tiny little staircases with beehives, and it's wild. It's really amazing. And I thought this was just a cool. The culture of Myanmar and Thailand and Southeast Asia is kind of rapidly gaining influence from the West. And a lot of places like in Thailand, you see so many motorbikes. And then you talk to some of the younger people, and they all want cars now because they see cars as higher class, and they see motorbikes as low income. We don't want to drive around motorbikes. That's what farmers use, this and that. That's what a lot of people in Thailand say. So there's huge influence of Western ideals of having a car, having a lot of money, and the scary part is that some of the roads are not built to accommodate so many cars. So they're very narrow, and so it's causing a lot of problems. I'd be interested to see how this all plays out with increasing population as well as increase of cars to these areas. And then this is another interesting thing we saw was this kind of gang of motorbikers who were doing all these tricks, and it felt very similar about it to what you would see in the U.S. So people doing tricks on their motorbikes and skateboards, and they were dressed in non-traditional Myanmar clothing. So I thought that was interesting. And then another thing, this is just kind of anecdotal. I saw this a lot in Thailand. People, their dogs just riding on the motorbikes with them, and they seem to have no problem balancing at all. So, and a lot of times you see the dog and 2 kids and a baby and a mom and a grandparent all on one motorbike. So it's wild. It's definitely a different place to travel. And then that's kind of it for all the pictures I have. Another question that kind of comes up in my mind that I think about sometimes, and maybe I can get your input on, is if a lack of infrastructure can also maybe could lead to safer streets in a way of sometimes if you have too much infrastructure with crosswalks in areas that could be more dangerous, it gives us a false sense of security. And you kind of put yourself on autopilot because you assume that the infrastructure is there to keep you safe. So I think in areas like this, even though there are, the death rates and fatalities are higher, you also see this rhythm of it all just working. And I wonder if it is that lack of infrastructure that people are forced to rely on themselves and be very attentive, because there's no government, there's no agency there to keep them safe. So I thought if anyone wants to comment on that.
I was not in any of those countries, but I was in all of Vietnam. There's north and south. And Myanmar is a right-wing dictatorship. Vietnam is a left-wing dictatorship. So neither of them are free countries. Although Vietnam has changed. With every year it changes and it becomes more market-oriented. But the bicycles and motorbikes there are the main means of transportation for everybody. I don't think we saw, the only buses were tourist buses. I don't think we saw regular omnibuses.
Yeah.
What they do with these bikes is incredible. And I kept thinking, if there were no bikes, if those were cars, the country would grind to a halt. I mean, there was no way that the existing roads, already conceivable roads, actually, could handle all of those cars. So it may well be that it will remain with bicycles on other creative means, motorbikes, scooters. A scooter can take even more people. And we've seen entire families through the streets of Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, where there are also pedicabs and occasional horse-drawn stuff, and but it works. It's scary to a Westerner, but it's even to us. I mean, try to cross the street, you have no idea what the rules are. They're not quite the same. There's usually no lights, but there's a kind of the traffic going this way. When the traffic coming this way gets large enough, they stop. And the others go through, and then vice versa. Where pedestrians fit into this, I could not figure. So we would dash across the street. I mean, I was serious. Being a New Yorker helps, because I noticed that you occupy a space. So the first motorbike after it stopped, how is it determined that you're going to go? Well, the first one goes and says, here I am, I'm taking the space, now it's my turn. And then everybody follows him. Well, that's the way across the street in New York. So regardless of lights or anything else. So it's the same kind of chaos, much of it based, not just, well, lack of infrastructure too. New York and Manhattan, the cross streets are not wide enough for two-way traffic either. That's why you can have a traffic jam extending and crossing the entire width of Manhattan. And so it's the fact that the infrastructure is old. You can't make it new without destroying buildings. I mean, where do you put it? And the population is very dense. So it's not, I mean, I think if they try to emulate the United States, it will be disastrous. They won't have a country. And I suspect that they realize that.
You know, to your question about infrastructure, you don't hear much about it anymore, but not that long ago, there was a effective cycling, it was called. The guy's name was Forrester, I think.
He was a professor at MIT.
And he always argued against, basically said much better solution than a bike lane marked on a highway, on a road, is a wide outside lane that gives you, some room to maneuver. And he had very good arguments for it, and he even taught classes. I don't know what's happened to that whole argument. It obviously lost because all around the nation it's all going to bike lanes, it seems like. But, I mean, like, for example, with bike lanes, when you come to a intersection and there's the cars beside you wanting to turn right and there's a bike there and you don't know what they're going to do, it's not an ideal situation by any means. So, yeah, I think there's definitely issues with going entirely the infrastructure route.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me think about awareness and how actually in those types of environments, people are, I think, far more likely to bring a very high level of awareness to what's happening in a given situation. And I do think that it's easy to become complacent in the transportation environments we have, maybe a little bit more so. So yeah, I think it's a great question. How can you effectively bring people's awareness back to what's happening?
And there probably aren't too many people texting at Miramar.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like a component of not just the transportation environment and the infrastructure, but a whole host of other things. The nice little cars we have with all their bells and whistles. Windows, yeah, sealed up, can't hear. It's like, yeah.
It closes you off from what's going on.
We were in Kathmandu in northern India, and it's the same. I think the United States is the exception. And it is, I think, the sharing of the road, it's not like this belongs to the automobile, and this little part is, we have these little distinctive areas where you're supposed to be there. It's all shared, as you've shown so well in your photographs. And also, because of the congestion, they move very slowly. So it's just not as, it's not as dangerous because there's no like one zone of cars where they just, go as fast as they want. So I think much what you said is really true, that the infrastructure does give a false sense of security and makes you be more insulated within your own, whatever, transport you're using. Thank you. It's really fun. And the honking is amazing. When we were first there, you really noticed it, of course, but then after a while, you don't even notice it anymore. We didn't notice it all until we got back here. Now we realized, oh yeah, honking. And then all the decorations too, it's really fun. Yeah. Little fringes and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. When we were riding around motorbikes, where I was hesitant the first time to hit my horn because I didn't want to offend the person that I was passing or make them think I was, annoyed by them, because that's how, we're kind of drilled to think about when you honk. So, but then once I got used to it, I would just do it every single time. So you kind of adapt to that.
Why do you know?
So Erisy, my comment about, and I kind of challenged you regarding Vision Zero. So if you were to, from your experiences, what you've shown us, to make any policy recommendations to City Council, what would that short list look like that you if anything, from your experiences and takeaways from your transportation experience in Southeast Asia.
I think a huge piece, because with Vision Zero, you have education and enforcement and engineering, kind of the three pillars of having an effective Vision Zero. And I think what I've learned from here is that the education should be a huge piece, because raising awareness of, drivers and cyclists and everyone who's on the streets, that you can shift that culture, which is, I think, probably the most challenging, because trying to, affect, have behavior change with people, trying to impart new wisdom or new way of looking at something, I think is always most challenging. But if there's a way to do a, campaign or educate more people about Vision Zero, about being more aware of your surroundings and thinking of the road as a shared space instead of just shifting that I'm in a vehicle, I've got my place to be, get out of my way mentality. I think that would be really, I think that's where it starts, because the engineering and enforcement pieces are coming because that education piece really isn't strong enough, because people aren't changing their behavior, so you have to have the other two pieces there. So, I don't know, Eve or, you guys are really involved with Vision Zero, so maybe Eve or Cameron have something else to add to that piece, or Barry.
I said that really well.
Sorry.
I think you said that really well, and I think the comment about speed limits is really interesting, because even so much of U.S. roadway engineering standards have sort of been designed to drive speed limits up and faster and faster in human environments, and because people are walking and biking, that you end up, I think, just response times are slower, and if you get hit at a faster speed, you're more likely to be injured. So it's interesting to see these pictures and think about how speed is a factor and in making people aware, and maybe that something to increase that awareness.
On a note, to actually echo both Deborah's and Eve's comments regarding Vision Zero, and on the note of education and campaigns, I'm not sure if people have noticed, but on television, California, I don't know if it's the California DOT or Safety Committee, has been really pushing TV ads that state pedestrians aren't made of armor, and it's got a guy that's in car doors, shield, a window, and just got his tunes on and walking into the street, and the car doesn't stop, and this and that. And so I'm really encouraged to see, at least on a state level, that especially with the recent statistics going on with pedestrian and bicyclist injuries and deaths, that that they're getting the message and that they're trying to make an effort, and hopefully that can help inform our city decisions on adopting Vision Zero policy. And with respect to speeds, I was also encouraged to see that after some recent traffic speed studies, the top 5 streets are going to be dropping their speed limits because the actual speed studies found that the average actual speed limit was, believe it or not, to be low enough so that big stretch of De La Vina and Napa and other places are actually going to go down. So it's nice to see.
One other thing Barry said about the people with their music in their ears and stuff. I kind of see it all the time. Riding my bike around, and especially when you're on a bike, it kind of blows my mind that people are doing that when they can't. You need all of your senses to hear what's around you, and if somebody's coming up quick, they just don't hear it. So I think that's a really important aspect as well.
May I? So our West Side Neighborhood Association on September 26th we've invited MTV. Maybe he didn't tell you. I think Jerry as well is coming. But Don Longstreet of your Vision Zero committee is coming to talk about it. So there's going to be a scratching of the surface or a preview of Vision Zero in 2 weeks. So in our neighborhood association. So we're talking about it. And Greg, I'm trying to remember when Vision Zero came to us. We all seemed excited about it, right?
6-1.
Oh, see, okay, so anyway, I look forward to
And I'm trying to find out what the date is. I texted somebody, but it's not coming up. But I think it's within the next month or so.
I think so.
Yeah, actually.
And do you know the venue of the meeting on the 26th on the west
I know
side?
we were talking, the West Side Neighborhood Center. But I can wait after the meeting to talk to you.
Well, we can, did you want to talk about it to the group more, or we can
No,
talk about it?
we had invited Eva and Coast to co-present with MTD.
I think we were planning to be there on the 26th.
I thought so.
Yeah.
So we're about to be finalizing with flyers. So I just wanted to make sure before we start spreading. Breaking news. Thanks.
Well, does anyone else have any comments or last minute announcements?
I just want to correct something I said because it could spread it. I do remember buses in Vietnam, both south and north. I remember people waiting on a queue and then the buses, so just it's age.
Did anyone make an announcement about the TCC openings? Okay, well, if anyone is interested, the city has 2 openings on the Transportation Circulation Committee, I believe, and it would be great to see a good post member or supporter apply for that.
Do you know, are the current members reapplying, or is there actual vacancies?
I think there are 2 vacancies. Maybe you're postal.
Maybe you can put
I'll add on the main page of the post website and connect. The applications are being received now and see all
Thank
the
you.
vacancies.
Yeah. And the deadline always comes up fast.
You have to be a city resident.
There might be a category. Hillary, is there a category for
We should.
county?
I think you do have to be an elector of the city for that one, but we can check. Because I think it's all the same thing.
So I think you're right.
Since
It makes sense to me to do that.
You can check what gets sent out. I think someone told me that you have to see if they don't get enough sleep. I say weekly. But I don't know that.
I think if they don't get enough applicants, then
They
it's
can't get
vacant.
anybody else.
Okay. No, that's all I was.
Thank you, Erisy, that was really fun.
Thank you all for
Oh,
It's fun to, I was having a fun time getting photos together, reminiscing on my travels.
I do have to say that if you still want to talk about it.
Thank you so much.
So you're